seen that fella with the truck, and it was very similar to my experience, that you had there at Canungra there, I see. That's what happened to me. You see, I was driving trucks. I'm 65 now, but I was only 23. Back in 78, of course, you used to hear a little bit about these things, but nothing much, and I wasn't even thinking about anything. And I worked for a firm called White Industries out there at Ulan, just past Mudgee. And what happened there, I cut through the back road there. Normally we were doing delivering coal to Golgong, but they wanted to load down to Sydney at Park Davis, and I cut through the back road between Ulan and Mudgee, and it was I loaded up, it was 24 hours operation, I loaded up about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and away I went. And I was a Kenworth with the bonneted Kenworths, and away I went and down that road. Anyway, it was only about 3 or 4 degrees. It was freezing because I remember I put the tarp on the truck, the coal truck. And as I'm going down the road, it had the big bull lights on, the big round bull lights, and I had a couple that would go 45 degrees into the bush because if a roo or something come out, you'd see it coming. And in the distance, I thought it was a fella hitchhiking. You sort of, what's he doing out here? It was 2 legs walking away from me on the side of the road. At any given time, I'm thinking, this guy's going to put out his finger or whatever. And I thought, this is a strange thing to be out here. Anyway, as I was getting closer, this thing's getting bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden it turned and looked into the bull lights. And I'd done a lot of roo shooting and that when I was younger, out in the properties and that. And when you're trying to torch into the paddocks, you can always see the sheep's eyes. They come up red. They turned and the eyes were as red, like they weren't human. At that point, as you can appreciate, when you're driving a truck and I'm doing about 60 or 70, 80 k's an hour on the dirt, I'm thinking I'm going to hit this thing, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to jackknife the truck, and then I thought, what's this? And what it was, and I thought it was going to jump on the bonnet. And then just as I was about to make contact with it, I wish I had the cam, it just turned and went into the bush. It must have been 3 metres tall at least because it was higher than my Kenworth bonnet. And I weighed at the time about 100 kilos, I suppose, but it'd be, it'd have to be about 350 kilos in weight. And it just walked off into the bush. But I just missed it with the bull bar, and that's what happened there, Dean. And you couldn't see in the middle of nowhere, looking in your rear vision mirror, it's just dark.
You're driving your Kenworth between Ulan and Mudgee at 3 a.m. It's a dirt road. At what distance did you first see it?
Probably around about the big, strong bull lights. I seen someone walking off, probably around about the 200 metre mark, 250 metres.
When you're at the closest distance to it, how far away was that?
Probably around about 40 to 50 metres.
Did it go from right to left or left to right?
Yes, it was walking down the road. I was expecting I thought it was someone going to hitchhike. I thought, why are they out here at 3 in the morning? I thought it was because it was on 2 legs, and I think that's the problem people have with these things, Dean, because when they're on 2 legs, you don't want to sort of, hit it. And even then, at that range, I thought, he's a big, tall man. It's not till he turned and looked at me that the eyes were red. In the bull lights, they come up bright red. Like human eyes don't do that.
Were the eyes larger than, say, a human's size eyes?
Yes.
Did you see them blink at any stage?
No. And another thing that was quite odd, the arms were quite long. His arms were quite long. They come down past. I got a good view. That's what sort of shook me too, because it was such a big object, and the arms come down past your hips down to about the halfway down near your knee.
Run through the build of it, say from head to toe.
Yeah, well, the build was probably thicker than a man. Where the height was about, well, as high as my Kenworth bonnet. If you see a Kenworth bonneted truck, they got the Kenworth badge at the front, and there's about another probably half a metre higher than a Kenworth badge on the truck, which is about 9 feet. The build was wider than me. I was 6 foot. It's probably about 3.5 feet wide. Couldn't see a chest. I couldn't see any of that. Couldn't see. It was just covered in fur. Not muscular as in like a gorilla, but just long hair.
How long was the hair and what colour?
It was like a blacky brown colour, similar to you see the black bears over over in Canada there, the blackie brown, probably only about 3 or 4 inches long.
Would you say it was matted hair, or was it...
No, it was straight hair. Wasn't matted, no.
And it was covered all over with hair?
Yeah. All I could see was the eyes, and the hair was on the face.
Was there any area of the body or face that had less hair?
Only around the eye sockets, near the nose. Everywhere else was covered in hair.
In what sort of manner was it walking? Was it walking like a human? Was it a little bit uncoordinated?
It was loping. It was, as I was getting closer, as you appreciate, it was small when it first came into the thing because you got the distance. As it was getting closer, it was sort of loping along. It was there. As I got closer, it was sort of like taking big strides, fairly big strides, and it was sort of loping along. And at that point, I remember it vividly. I'm thinking, what is this, or who is this, or whatever. And you got to appreciate when you're driving a big truck, you can jackknife a truck, and and I'm thinking, is this someone going to step out in front of me, or there's a lot of things going through your mind when you're driving a truck at speed, Dean. And I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what it was, who it was. But the thing that got me, the most thing that got me, when it turned and looked at the truck, because its eyes were, red, and it bounced back off the lights, and that really panicked me because I didn't know what I was dealing with. Then I thought, and you got to appreciate, is this thing as big enough to jump on my bonnet? I'm closing on it pretty quick at 80, 90 k's an hour, and it was on a dirt road.
Being a truck driver, I would imagine that you'd be pretty spot on with your weights.
Yes. Yeah.
350 kilos, that's a fair hunk of muscle.
Oh, yeah, it was a big thing, and I've never forgot it. I can tell you the exact date. It was the 30th of October 1978. I've told this story to a lot of people. You can ring me 5 years later and I'll tell you exactly the same story, and I've told people. Like, it was such an imprint on my mind. And when I went down to Sydney, when I come back to Mudgee, I pulled into one of the hamburgers and there was a farmer there, and he'd had a couple of incidents out near in the same spot where he got a flat tyre one time, and he had a 1-ton ute with a cage on the back, and he had a few animals. He couldn't change it. He didn't have a spare, and he went back home, and it was just on dark, and he can go, I'll do it in the morning. When he came back, all the canvas was all shredded, like he was telling me, like a knife, on the side of the canvas. Quite a few farmers around that area, they were quite adamant there was something in the bush.
The reported sightings began probably about 1906, so it has a fair history. It's looking at you, and you're seeing the eyes. Now then, what does it do? Does it turn away?
It turned away, thank goodness. At that point, I was close enough, 30 or 40 metres, and it was closing in quick. At that point, it just sort of turned left and went into the bush. Thank goodness. I was near on impact. Like, if it had come the other way, I would have hit it full with the bull bar, you know what I mean?
When it was looking at you, did it turn around fully and look at you? It had its back to you in the beginning, and then it's turned around and looked at you.
Yes, and its head could nearly turn around. It was really interesting because the body didn't turn as much as the head. The head could actually turn quite, more than that. It sort of just looked at me. I was sort of looking at its face, but I was quite astounded how big it was. That was I'm looking over the bonnet of the Kenworth truck, and it's above that, like...
I have heard reports of their heads turning around disproportionately to, say, what a human can.
Yeah. It was disproportionate. It was nearly walking forward, and the head sort of turned around like The Exorcist. It sort of turned around at a disproportionate to the body. I was terrified. I was absolutely... Of course, what made me more terrified was the sake that its eyes were not human, and I'd spotted, like, I know that when if you ever go shooting and you go in there and you see, if you spotlight, when you go through the paddocks, you can see sheep and foxes and that, their eyes come back at you, so you know not to shoot the sheep. They're different, and that's what really threw me. I thought, what the hell? And of course, I panicked, and the thing that I thought, Dean, that the thing had jumped on me truck. When I got the Mudgee, I'm looking all over. I jumped out of the truck and I looked all over underneath and up the top. And when you're out in the bush and looking in the rear vision mirror of the truck, it's just pitch black. All you can see is a trail of marker lights, Because people said, why didn't you stop? I said, you've got to be joking. This thing, I'd never been able to... It'd be like you're trying to attack a brown bear, and you wouldn't have any chance, you know what I mean?
You're looking at the eyes. They're looking at you. They're reflecting red, or are they illuminating?
they're reflecting back at me red.
The shape of the eyes?
The eyes were like an almond shape. Very similar to sheep, like a sheep's eyes.
Looking at this thing, in your mind, what did it most resemble? Would you say ape, Neanderthal or human?
A cross between a human and an ape. A mixture of both.
Did you see any facial expressions?
No, couldn't see it from the hair. No, I couldn't see its teeth, didn't open its mouth. I couldn't see its mouth, it was covered with hair. The main thing was the eye sockets, the eyes.
What's your interpretation of its response after it saw you?
I think it got in a bit of a panic. I think the bull lights on me startled it. I think because they were bright, they were two big 100-watt bull lights with the thing. I think it got startled, like I didn't know what to do. At that time, I was nearly going to blow the air horn. I didn't pull the air horn on. I should have, and I didn't. But it sort of startled with the lights, I think, and the noise of the engine. I think it just got startled, like any animal in the bush. I think it just got startled. But at that point, you know what kangaroos or anything can do? They can come in front or they can get off the road. That's what I was faced with. I didn't know which way it was going to jump. And, of course, being on two legs, you think to yourself, is this a guy in a suit or is it... And I reckon that's, Dean, I reckon that's the reason why a lot of people haven't either shot one or come... Because when something's walking on two legs, you'd be very hesitant to shoot at it or run it over, I reckon. Do you hear that a lot in the...
Yeah, I certainly do. I hear that a lot. They won't take the shot because they're not quite sure whether it's human or not, or, as you say, someone in a suit.
Yeah. What I'm thinking though, Dean, it's been a long time and I talk about it every now and then. I tell everyone that the thing is, how are these ones, they must have some sort of camouflage themselves in the bush very, very well. Like they're such a big creature. How do they camouflage in themselves, do you believe?
If somebody doesn't want to be found, they won't. If you have a look at the vastness of the Australian bush, there is so much territory out there that is undiscovered. You can live your whole life out there and not be found if you don't want to. If you're a fugitive and you knew how to live off the bush, you wouldn't be found, would you? Particularly if the secret of your survival is not to be seen.
But with the truck driver, it'd be good to him to relate to my story. Did he actually hit the thing or did it just...
He stopped within 1 to 2 metres and then it stood up. Looked straight at him in the eyes. He said the first reaction was shock. He said the second reaction from it was embarrassment. He said the third reaction was anger. Then it thumped his bonnet. He said when it thumped his bonnet, he said it was like hitting a Mazda 3. The ironic thing about this is he wasn't driving his truck at the time. He had put his truck in that morning for a service. His truck had a dash cam.
Oh, right.
But, time, place, circumstance, but perhaps if he was driving his truck, then he wouldn't have come round that corner at that same time.
It's vividly in my mind, and I can tell you like that again and again, and I have told people over the years, some think I'm a bit funny, and other people have said, well, must be something in it. I was well wide awake and quite adamant what I seen, You can always tell because I could repeat that story now 30 years on.
The area does have a long history. The earliest newspaper reports sort of began in 1906, 1909. Henry Lawson wrote about it, the hairy man of Mudgee, in his book Triangles of Life in 1916.
Oh, really?
We had some reports in Mudgee around 1998, and as recent as last year, 2018, there's one standing on the side of the road holding a chicken.
Well, there you go. Well, see, I didn't even know those reports, and that's what that farmer said, that he had chickens in the back of that van, and whatever it was tried to get to them, but the steel cage prevented it from getting the chickens out on that same road when his car broke down.
If you sort of pan over to the east, there's a Pandora's box of Yowie sightings.
Yeah, see, I'm not up on all that. I haven't you're the man in that sort of aspect. It was about 20 k's out from Ulan on the back road there. You got a road from Ulan to Mudgee. One goes to Golgong. I think it's tar now.
Well, that's actually a stone's throw from last year's sighting. The last year's sighting was in a place called Botoba or Barra, which is pretty much right next to Ulan.
You're right. Yeah, you can tell that fella that was driving the truck, he's not on his own. And the funny thing is, a lot of us that do sight it, we're not wackos, or we're not people who, are just normal people. They're not conjuring it up in their mind, or they're not...
Many people who have sightings previously weren't aware of what they even were.
You're just not thinking about it or anything, and it just happens, like it just happened on the day or the night, and it's always been imprinted in my mind. So,
as I say, it's a life-changing experience. People don't view the Australian bush the same way again. Some people who have a more dramatic experience suffer through a bit of PTSD.
No way. I would have stopped there that night out there. Probably didn't affect me that, but it just imprinted in my brain. Because I remember when pulling away, you think, has this thing jumped on the back of the load? Just because I seen it walk into the bush doesn't mean it could have turned around and jumped on the back. I was terrified for the next half an hour or 40 minutes to get to Mudgee under the lights. So it does affect you, yeah. You wonder what's going on, There isn't funny that you should say it does affect you. Like, I very rarely camp out at night now. Yeah, but I got a camper van, but I don't camp in the bush. Isn't that funny? It's funny you should say that. It does affect you, doesn't it? Funny how, when you just said it does affect you, I just think about that. No, I would never camp, free camp in the bush. Isn't that funny? You're right what you said. It does affect you, doesn't it?